Welcome to the Energy Institute East Midlands branch webinar, and tonight we're going to hear from Michael Gallagher, who, as the slide says in front of you, is the head of Midlands Net Zero Hub. I've got a brief bio of Michael here, and you can see him on the screen. Michael studied Earth and Environmental Science at Lancaster University, and after that he spent a year teaching in Hong Kong before starting his career working at the Energy Savings Trust in Nottingham. This role developed into consultancy work, delivering fuel poverty related service level agreements with local authorities in the Midlands. Michael then worked for the Mark Group in Leicester as a solar PV system designer, working on large scale social housing, local authority and commercial projects, and later he moved on to work for JJM in Derby as an operations manager, overseeing the supply and installation of building integrated solar PV across the UK for the construction sector. During this time, he also worked for and gained an MSc in Energy and Industrial Sustainability from De Montfort University. In his current role, Michael is the head of Midlands Net Zero Hub, which is funded by BEIS, and he's responsible for a team that delivers £185 million worth of funding across community energy, retrofit, minimum energy efficiency standards enforcement, skills and training, and large-scale energy project development. And I know that Michael is going to talk about many of those different types of roles that the Midlands Net Zero Hub oversees, and go into a bit more detail in some of the ones that we agreed we thought would be of more interest to our members. So what we'll do for the evening is what we always do. If you have any questions for Michael, please type them into the chat at the side, and at the end of the evening we'll have some time for questions, and I'll read those out and Michael will answer the questions. I think it's easier doing it that way over Zoom than everybody trying to speak at the same time. So I'll hand over to Michael now, and off you go.
Lovely. Thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. Mate. Pleasure to be here, and I'll look forward to hopefully answering some of the questions towards the end of this presentation. As Rick touched on in the intro there, but the team is fully funded by BEIS, but Nottingham City Council acts as the accountable body. So the entire team are fully embedded into the Carbon Reduction, Energy and Sustainability Division within the council. And it was a good place to start the building of the hub from almost 4 years ago, 1st of October 2018. I walked through the door as the first person into the team. They are a very ambitious council. You know, they've got the carbon neutral 2028 target for the city. And kind of the appetite and the passion and what they've proven to deliver kind of gave us a really positive base to build the hub on across the wider Midlands region. Initially, we were a team of 9 to reflect the 9 Midlands LEPs, their local enterprise partnerships. And the role of the team was to work with the LEPs and local authorities across the Midlands region to support that development of energy projects and programmes that aligned with the LEP energy strategies that were produced by the LEPs and funded by BEIS back in 2018 and early 19. And of course, this has evolved into a role of supporting the UK government's commitment to net zero and aligns with what is now their Net Zero 2050 strategy. But we initially started off with the local capacity support programme, circa 1.4 million over, we had temporary 2-year contracts to cover the region and build capacity and support that development of the projects. But we've grown considerably since then as we're approaching our 4th year. And this is a result of demonstrating to government that the team had the capability to ultimately channel funding from government into the region and to develop successfully a range of projects and programmes. So I've referenced some of the programmes here. We've got the local authority delivery phase 2. It's a £60 million project, delivering retrofit, working with the local authorities across the Midlands. Sustainable warmth competition is a follow-on to that, where we secured a further 82 million to work on retrofit. And Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund was a £15 million scheme, which with the match funding takes it close to about 26 million in all. And the reason these have been successful is because of where we've identified as how we can add value to the work that needs to be done and how we can enable the local authorities to crack on and deliver a place-based solution, and where we can then take away and do some of the heavy lifting, which I'll touch on shortly. We've had the Green Homes Grant Skills Training competition, This is completed. It was a national competition, national in this case covering England. That programme was evaluated, very successful, and we'd put out 5.9 million into the region, into England across that. And we'll shortly be launching Skills Training 2, again, England-wide on that. And this time we'll be putting out about 9.2 million into England and the training sector. For private rental sector, minimum energy efficiency standard enforcement competition, or we just call it PRS MEES, given the fact that it's a bit of a mouthful. We initially secured circa 2 million for that programme, but due to receiving about 119 applications into that, that got topped up to about 4.6 odd million pounds. And we've just had a further top up to that, again, to extend the programme further. So we've been working with 59 local authorities there, and but we're hoping to engage with further 26 now. And then the public sector decarbonisation skills fund, that's a regional one. It's live. We made it live earlier on this year, and we've got a team of 4 exclusively focusing on the public estate. So small budget there. It's predominantly focusing on the staff resource, so circa 1.1 million there. And then the Royal Community Energy Fund, all funds fully allocated for this one now. We've been running it for about 2.5, coming up to 3 years. And that's where we secured circa 2 million for the region to work with community energy groups to develop an exciting range of energy projects. So I'll touch on some of these in a bit more detail as we work through this evening. This is the theme as it stands. We've seen growth since we started with that initial team of 9 to reflect the range of projects and programmes we're now delivering. So hopefully we'll be able to fill those new vacancies soon. We can continue to deliver a range of exciting projects. I mean, the big thing here, we started off with a team of 8 reporting directly into me on a very flat structure, and through the growth, obviously, we've had to evolve this and make sure we've aligned different teams into the different programs that need to be running. But we've got a real diverse range of skill sets and backgrounds from the team, which enable us to be very flexible in what we can deliver. We've got a mix of ex-PhD students, master's students, people from industry, people with finance and procurement style backgrounds. So, it's all about trying to make sure that we've got different viewpoints, different skill sets, and making sure that collectively we're an effective and efficient team delivering these exciting programs across the region. So if I start with a regional team first, this is the beating heart of the hub, as I call it. The first 9 there who really got things established and things moving forward. I mean, to date, they've supported 158 energy projects, of which, and we've got a further 62 that are currently live across the Midlands. That pipeline does tend to evolve. It fluctuates between that 62 up to 100 at any given time. The rough value of the pipeline tends to sit somewhere between about 350 and 400 million. So it demonstrates, there's a huge potential for delivering net zero in the Midlands, and there's so much underway currently at the moment. The pie chart we've got on the screen there just kind of gives an idea of the breakdown of the different types of projects the team are delivering on. It's a real mix from energy efficiency in buildings. It's always important to try and reduce the need for energy in the first place as a starting point. But then everything through from electric vehicle infrastructure, looking at heat-led projects, so supporting things like HNDU and HNIP applications for heat networks, power generation. So, for example, there's a project that's gone in recently up in Wolverhampton. It's probably one of the biggest inner-city solar PV ground arrays that there is in the country. It's 6.9 megawatt feeding a hospital, and it's based on an old landfill. So we're instrumental there in the start of that project. Network innovation, hydrogen, industrial clusters. So, a real mix across the kind of the power, heat and transport themes, which is why it's important to have, a diverse team, but also a team that's willing to learn and adapt quite quickly, given the scale of what we're trying to achieve in the Midlands on our ambition to reach net zero. Some of the recently completed projects I think are really exciting. So we'll shortly be putting on the website. This is pretty imminent. I expect it to be on the site in the next couple of days. Is the electrification of depots work. So this is where we've worked with a consultancy to essentially put together a guide on if local authorities have a desire to electrify their fleets, which more and more are doing, is about looking at what they need to do for that hard infrastructure so that they can charge their vehicles appropriately. I mean, depot managers and fleet managers aren't necessarily, EV and infrastructure specialists. So they need to have an idea of how to work through that journey and how best to approach it, as opposed to just purchasing electric vehicles and then figuring out how many charges they need to go on, and then finding out the grid can't actually manage or keep up with the desire without expensive upgrades. So it's about taking them on that journey so that they're planned and can start getting ahead of what they need to do. The low carbon horticulture is a really exciting one, which I'll touch on in a bit more detail, where what we mapped out as that map of the Midlands shows potential sites for using waste heat to grow food. And the idea behind some of these projects, like electrification of depots, we looked at three case studies actually. So we've zoned in on 1 or 2 areas, but then it's a resource that can be used and replicated elsewhere. With low carbon horticulture, we've kind of looked at the big picture, and our next step with that is kind of zooming into 1 or 2 areas. And it's the same with the low carbon transport hubs, where we've mapped out across the region where there's the potential for these sites to go for EV charging, hydrogen, biofuels, and so on. And then our next step on that is bringing a lens into a couple of sites to kind of develop business cases that can then be replicated across the wider geography again. The low carbon environmental goods and service sector report is, I think, a really, really good piece of work. We worked with an organisation called K-Matrix on this one. And this is where we defined what the sector is. And then we mapped it out across the Midlands, and then also broke it down to LEP level. So we've got multiple reports there, kind of that Midland spectrum, then that LEP level that gives you data down to that local authority side. So, for example, we identified that the sector as a whole to the Midlands is worth a little over 26 billion. For D2N2, the Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire side where I sit, it's about 5.4 billion worth. And then within that report, you can really get into the detail of, the different sectors and subsectors that contribute to that. And again, I'll probably touch on that in a bit more detail shortly. There we go. What I have kind of pulled out from this, and there's I said about 10 reports or so, because we looked at the impacts of COVID on the sector, due to that being quite a hot topic at the particular time. And also where the skills gaps were in the sector that need to be addressed to achieve net zero. But if I'm allowed to, this is my favourite graph from the report, because it shows, out of all the technologies, which is most scalable and which is really going to contribute to GVA. Now, as to be expected, consultancy is very scalable. There's a big demand, where we struggle to get hold of consultants at the time for various pieces of work, but it doesn't contribute much to GVA. But you look at things like alternate fuels, so hydrogen, biofuels, that sort of thing. Building technology is really interesting when you're looking at the scalability of that, plus what it actually contributes to the economy. So really, really exciting. And you see the big the top 5 really there: wind, building technologies, alternate fuels, PV, and wastewater treatment are real significant contributors. So if you're looking at doing any work in the space, looking at funding bids, for example, then this report, which is available on our site, I put the link there, is an absolute goldmine of data. And the way the reports are written up, it's very easy to kind of look at the big report and then go, right, I want to dive in, look at a more focused report on an area and get the data, because the chapters and the way it's set out means you can literally hop from one to the other. So very easy to extract data and work it to funding bid purposes and others, of course, if it's more the research side you're interested in. So just to build on that alternate fuels and low carbon transport side, we worked with Coventry City Council and Senex to look at detail on low carbon transport hubs. There's a link there to the report. That was on the old website. We're going to put it on the new website shortly, but that link should still work. And this, alongside that LSEG report, really lays out the potential of our region in both low carbon transport and alternate fuels. So to put a lens to that, alternate fuels, when we did the work, contributed 3.8 billion. That's looking at everything as a whole, R&D functions, the providers, the designers, the implementation, sales. So, it's a very full picture there, and it shows that actually alternate fuels still to a point seems like something in the future, but realistically in the Midlands, it's here now, it's developing and growing. And from the actual vehicle side that goes alongside it, it's already contributing 1.5 billion when you look at the whole picture there. And interestingly, from a Midlands perspective, we've seen stronger growth in the Midlands back in 1718 and 1920 at 11.4% compared to the UK as a whole at 5.7%, which shows that, as a region, we're doing really well in this area. And, it's exciting to hope that we can continue to grow that and keep leading the way. Of course, the big thing about the hub is we want to make sure that the work is replicable, but we acknowledge that within the work, there's going to be sites that we've missed. We didn't identify every single one. And it's also important, I think, that this work can be used in other hub areas. So we've got a set of criteria that we developed of what makes a good site, the blue being the key and the light blue kind of being, ideal, the nice stuff to have. Brownfield land is always preferable to greenfield, for example. Near to gas transmission network is useful if hydrogen ends up being utilized through that network. So trying to think ahead there on what could really help bring down costs of getting these fuels to site. But the big thing on this is somebody else can come along, look at the work and kind of apply it to what they're doing outside of the Midlands, and hopefully replicate what we've starting doing. Kind of our next steps on this, and it's starting to gather a little bit of momentum, is our board have agreed to put some match funding into 3 key sites across the Midlands to develop business cases ultimately to start driving this forward. So that's where I referenced at the beginning. We've kind of got that big picture, and we're now putting a lens to develop some of these sites, hopefully prove the case, and then hopefully we've got some templates, a couple of different templates that can be lifted and applied to other sites. There's always nuances, but people won't be starting from scratch once we've done this initial work. It complements nicely what Midlands Connect had done, and we did liaise with them on this work. They did a similar exercise, but they had a pure focus on heavy freight. So I've linked to their work as well if you've got specific interest on there. But of course, as you'd expect, and it kind of led a bit of credibility to our respective pieces of work, some of the sites we identified overlaid really, really nicely, which kind of really builds the case on why those sites potentially should be pushed forward. And they also then put us in a strong position to support some work led by EDF and ERA, the Energy Research Accelerator, where we successfully put in a bid for Innovate UK for H2GV MIDS. And this is where there was a big consortia which involved identifying all the necessary infrastructure needed for hydrogen refueling stations, developing the business case delivery systems, and establishing that trial lease system for truck operators. So I've linked to the ERA website as we were a small participant in that, but valuable based on the work we'd already done, which helps speed up the delivery of that project. And I know we're looking at the next phase of that. We're hopefully leading another bid in due course, fingers crossed. So that's the transport side. The other area, because we're all about trying to also add value. We're not interested in kind of repeating what the people have done necessarily. We're trying to look for things where we can grow and add value in the region. And one thing we approached on was, food security is certainly a big challenge. And this aligns with, the energy security, both of which, are really hot topics at the moment with everything that's going on the global stage. So we kind of broke this down into a couple of sections. We had the Farms of the Future work, where we worked with the Royal Agricultural Society of England. And this was to really map out what the farm of the future would look like. And then there was the follow-on work, which I'll touch on shortly. So this is work package 1. And just to flag, you'll see there's a Midlands Energy Hub logo there. We've rebranded since we're now the Midlands Net Zero Hub with a slightly new logo. But you will come across some of the Energy Hub stuff and the stuff we did before the start of this financial year. So with this work for Farms of the Future, the core theme here was to see how we can adjust the farming to meet the challenges that they've got to deal with climate change. So looking at what the mechanisms for change are and what policy adjustments need to be brought in and support mechanisms to do this, and looking at the journey the farming sector needs to go on. Alongside, of course, looking at the opportunities that these bring and what business models need to be thought about. And it's really important as we go through this process for people to understand how to engage with farmers, growers, and the rural communities. So what we've kind of done with this work, appreciating that people have different interests and aspects there, is kind of broken it down into a number of different reports, looking at the vehicles and future fuels in one section, production of cereals, general horticulture production, the meat production and dairy production. So kind of the key areas of farming in the UK there. So again, those reports are available. I've popped it there. And the technical sector reports are available from the RASI website. So again, if anybody's got any particular interest there, then we are looking to see how we can build and expand on that work. So please do get in touch after if this is a particular area of interest. Like I said, food and energy security hand in hand and have to be dealt with together as we look to see how we approach the future challenges. And when you throw climate change, and there's a really big challenge, but an exciting opportunity as well, I think, here to support the farming community. And this kind of led to the local and horticulture side, where we're like, well, how can we use the energy that's already out there to grow food ultimately? We bring an awful lot of food in from overseas, often on air freight, and the carbon footprint with that is quite intensive. But equally, growing food in greenhouses, particularly if heated by gas, is energy intensive. Big carbon footprint, and of course the cost of both fuel and gas has increased considerably, so it's quite expensive. So we're trying to find out, and with this report, well, is there an opportunity to do things in a better way and decrease the carbon footprint and decrease the cost of growing food? So we've done this mapping exercise, and then with that we did some micro feasibility studies and that future project development piece. And again, we're now trying to identify, and we've got a meeting later on this week with some stakeholders to see how we can progress this work. We've got funding ring-fenced again to put into the next stage of hopefully seeing if we can develop business cases for a couple of sites that we're identified. So it's all about going, right, where's the gap that the hub can fill? What does the opportunity look like? And then putting that lens in to see, right, can we actually start pushing something forward? And there's actually a huge amount of interest and excitement in this space, which is really reassuring. Given that we're putting some funding into this area. Rural Community Energy Fund. This has been, I think, a really exciting fund, and it's been great to be able to administer this. I mean, it shows the depth and breadth of interest for community-led energy. Is the fact we've had over 500 organisations contact us. That's really significant. Now, of those, 52 applications were made to the board, of which 35 were successfully funded. And of those, 7 have gone on to stage 2. So stage 1 is we had about 40k for feasibility studies. And then stage 2, we had 100k then to get them investment ready ultimately. Today, we've had 20 stage 1 completed. That number's actually slightly higher. We've had a few more piling in the last couple of weeks since I've prepared these slides, which is good. And of the stage 2, we've got 1 that has recently got capital funding, which is really, really good. I'll touch on that in a moment. And then there are others that are kind of getting close. So we're hoping to have all these wrapped up by the end of this financial year. So through this, we've awarded over 1.6 million into the region. The Cromford Mill one is really, really exciting. So this is one that has just got capital funding, courtesy of Severn Trent. It's in the Northern Gateway in the Derwent Valley Mills. And what I think is really interesting, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So, there's a lot of challenges from a planning perspective. But what's great is when you go back to 1771, and Sir Richard Arkwright there developed the first successful water-powered cotton spinning mill. So it's a place that was powered by renewable energy 250 odd years ago. It acted kind of as a cornerstone for the Industrial Revolution, which started off being green. We're now kind of bringing this low carbon technology back to the site. So they've received stage 1 and stage 2 funding through the hub. And then, as I mentioned there, the capital funding is now coming from Severn Trent and Derbyshire County Council. With where Simon, who's leading on that project, and you can see him in the picture there, is reinstating a water wheel at another site nearby. And in that picture, they're looking to install hopefully a 20 kilowatt hydro turbine to power the building. So you can see that, also have a range of businesses in them. The scheme will also see a heat pump installed in the town hall, and an old turbine in the near village restored. And then the energy that will be sold from these will generate income. And then that will be managed through a CIC, so the profits can then be used to develop other projects in the village. So, it's all about how we can both decarbonise rural communities, but then also support them to do more. And I think this is going to make for a really great case study, because of the challenges of doing this sort of work in, such a planning restricted area. So just to change track a little bit, so starting to head into the retrofit world. And I've started with this one because it's how you drive and encourage action on the domestic level. And in the private rental sector, there's real challenges with making sure homes are in a fit state for the people that are renting them. And with this, it's a really important program, I think, to kind of push this forward. And I would stress it that initially this is about encouraging and supporting landlords to meet the regulations, as opposed to just coming along and giving them a fine. Yes, fines can come in later if they don't comply, but this is about enabling local authorities to work with the local authorities. So initially 4.7 million was made available here. They could bid up to 100,000 of revenue to help them build that capacity to enforce MEES in their areas. And then that assistance will help drive the upgrades in the worst performing private rental homes. So really, we're looking to support local authorities with the introduction of the approach for enforcing the requirements under the MEES regulations, and to assist them with the financial needs that they've got, so they can actually build that compliance and enforcement capacity and capability, because traditionally there was very little being done in this space, despite the regulations being there. And of course, then there's that action on reducing fuel poverty and the carbon emissions being produced by housing and the commercial sector in their areas. So it's got that net zero angle as well. So to date, we've got 59 local authorities supported. And as a result of that, we've had over 190,000 tenants and landlords engaged in the programme, 257,500 private rental properties identified, 7,000 exemption registers reviewed, and 29,500 non-compliant properties identified. That's really significant numbers across the piece. I've got there, we were in the process of scoring a further 1.8 million. That has now been secured. We're just in the process of getting the agreements out with a further 26 local authorities. So it's great that we can build that. And this is covering the whole of England and Wales as well. So it's really, really fantastic to be able to do this at a national level. And then that kind of links on, we're kind of pushing the private rental sector in a direction. But there's also an angle here where you're looking at the retrofit market. There's real challenges with actually achieving the levels of retrofit we need to be achieving on a weekly, monthly, annual basis, even with all the grant funding that's available. So the skills training program was key to building that supply chain. So we had 5.7 million claimed by providers when we ran this program. There were 18 appointed through this, of which 16 delivered in full and up to the deadline. We had an external evaluation done of this, which is available. So if you're interested in the details, then the link to the report is there. But it was really successful ultimately. I mean, close to 7,000 training courses completed. And furthermore, because we had the PAS 2035 regulations coming in, which many of the grant funded schemes need to comply with 302 organisations supported either to get PAS 2035 or also MCS accreditation, which was also a requirement of the grant funding schemes that are out there. And again, really good learner satisfaction rate, not sat at 92%. So, all credit there to the housing providers. And we're now in a position where we're gearing up, getting ready. Hopefully, once this period of mourning has passed, to launch the 9.2 million skills training. So we've got a bit more of a focus on this than we did in the previous, where we took some lessons learned. And now we're going to focus specifically on heat pumps, insulation, and retrofit coordinators and assessors, because that, with the evaluation of what we've done, showed where the real need was to accelerate retrofit. Which then leads quite nicely onto that. We've got that regional retrofit team delivering a whole host of work across the Midlands there. I mentioned some of the figures early on, 60 million for local authority delivery 2, which is actually coming to a close at the end of this month. But we've got local authorities who are in training gearing up to deliver for sustainable warmth, which is Lab 3 and Hug, Hug being home upgrade grants. And there's 82 million we've secured from Midlands there. And also then the Social Housing Decarb Fund, which is, as I mentioned, sat at 15 million. Now, what we wanted to do as Hub was ensure that local authorities could really take that place-based approach. And so we identified what regional support mechanisms we could implement to enable them to deliver that funding at that local level. So alongside regular workshops to assist them with what they needed to do, we procured a range of services to assist with customer journey support and implementation. So this service that we've contracted out to 5 organisations in the Midlands, 4 of which are charities, have defined areas and informed citizens of what the process is, and also then acts as a single point of contact, so it makes everything much more smoother for the people whose homes are being retrofitted. Procurement is also a big issue for local authorities, so we put into place 2 dynamic purchasing systems, DPSs, that they could use to procure installers and professional services. We kind of did that hard piece of procurement work for them. So we've kind of put into place this pre-qualification process for suppliers. So then there's a kind of like approved list in place. There's elements of electronic tendering here, and then it just streamlines the whole process, reduces workload across the board, and it makes it more efficient on both the supply side and also for the local authorities who are looking to put these contracts in place. The other aspect that we've had challenges with is the fact there's lots of technical aspects to retrofit. And of course, local authorities, while many are used to dealing with this, there's still a lot to get their heads around. So we put together a retrofit toolkit that provided them with a guide to retrofit and past 2035 and helps them manage the compliance side. There's a link to that toolkit there if, again, you're interested. And alongside this, we also got every local authority working with us, membership to the Centre of Excellence for retrofit through the Retrofit Academy, which saves significant sums of money when you broke it down at an individual level. You know, it's reduced the cost from about 2,000 per local authority to about 500, and has acted as a brilliant support mechanism for them. Now, throughout everything the Hub do, collaboration is key, and certainly that's the case with retrofit. And we've demonstrated through regional delivery that the importance of collaboration, including the achievements of the local authorities, what they delivered, and the procured customer journey supports. What the local authorities have fed back is the support provided through what the Hub has procured with the CJS is really invaluable through the marketing of the schemes to the residents, how they've triaged the referrals that come in, making sure that people are eligible for the schemes, and supporting the residents through the past 2035 process, which is relatively new. And this has resulted in thousands of referrals in the Midlands to date. With any big programme, there's been many lessons learned, which are shared regionally to support local knowledge and capability. And while, you know, we've had real challenges with the timescales, what local authorities found is that being part of a scheme at this scale, relevant to, you know, their own demographic and geographic side, that they've now got really good foundations to access the next waves of capital investment coming through. Some of the challenges that are kind of faced in this as we kind of work in this space to achieve net zero, material shortages. You know, COVID's not helped, Brexit not helped, but and also there's been a big increase in demand through the retrofit schemes. Internal resource in organisations has been a challenge. There's the skills gap. Again, that's why I've talked about this, the need for it earlier, and the value to the work of running these training programmes through the Hub. And there are multiple schemes out there. So often you've only got one officer in a local authority who's trying to manage these multiple funding streams, and it's a huge workload. Timescales are often the challenge. You know, there's really tight timeframes to some of the early schemes in particular. You know, things would be delivered within a year and 18 months. Within that, you've got to gear up, procure, get your households on board, deliver the measures, and you've got weather that factors into some of them, like external wall insulation. You've got to be done within certain temperatures. It doesn't work when it's raining and so on. So lots of challenges with these things. Costs have increased over the last couple of years as well. Some quite significantly, and there's been the getting to grips the past 2035 as well. which has caused some real challenges across the supply chain. But ultimately, this is about driving quality, which is why it's so important. And of course, with all the different programs that are out, it does cause a degree of competition across the LAs and the workforce. And with some of the programs, there's some really strict criteria, which can make it hard sometimes to support residents that really need it, but don't quite fit that strict criteria. Then moving on from the domestic retrofit, there's the public estate. Across the Midlands, they don't make up a huge percentage. It's a couple of percent, probably 3-4%. I think I've certainly heard a few local authorities reference. We only make up 1%, 2%, 3%, depending on their size. But it's still an important starting point on the net zero journey. Local authorities leading the way here. And so this year we developed this team to come in and help work with local authorities and other public sector organisations to actually drive the development of business cases, with a particular view initially to hopefully get some funding bids in for SALIX, which are about to open the next round of the public sector decarbonisation scheme. So hopefully of the 40 organisations that are in our pipeline, we'll get a good portion of those ready for that funding bid in a few weeks' time. So already done a range of things in the 6 months since that team started coming into place. Training, getting that documentation in place, getting those buildings, that pipeline built, developing that collaboration piece, setting our objectives, developing the reporting process, and then building up that team. Like I said, we're in a really strong position now to start getting those funding bids hopefully into SALIX when that window opens. But there will also be instances where we build up the business case and actually it makes sense to do it without grant funding and we can just crack on. And I expect to see more of those with where we are with the cost of energy at the moment. So I think that ties it up. I was hoping to rattle through in about 35 minutes or so we're about there. So I'm happy to take questions, which I think are appearing in the chat. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was fascinating. Thanks for the talk. Yeah, there have been some questions typed and I've put some in and some of my colleagues have put some questions in the chat. And I'd encourage anybody else that has a question in mind that they haven't typed in yet, please do that. The chat window works. So if I may use sort of chair's privilege and ask you a question first of all, and then I'll read out some of the other ones. Demand for domestic micro generation, in my experience, just in conversations with people locally, seems to have really spiked at the moment. Obviously, I think driven by the energy crisis. But many people have said that the prices have shot right up as well from what they expected to be paying, from what they're now being asked to pay. And I guess that's because maybe demand is outstripping supply. So my question is, how fast do you think the sector can grow with help such as yours from the Net Zero Hub? How fast can the sector grow safely to meet demand in a way that consumers can trust?
Well, we're certainly seeing an increase in costs, and it's causing us real challenges across our retrofit programs. I mean, to give you an idea, I think EWI has roughly gone from circa 10 to 12 up to kind of 18-20k a property based on your kind of average 3-bed semi-detached. I know the prices of solar are going up, and there's a combination both of the cost of materials are increasing, the cost of imports are increasing, the cost of labour is increasing, and so inevitably the cost of these measures are unfortunately growing. We have seen a huge decrease in the cost of some of these, solar in particular, over time. So it's not surprising we're seeing a slight bump given everything that's going on at the moment. I think the big aspect of that is that I think the business case is still actually really strong for them, even with the increase in the price, because we're seeing such an increase in the supply side. It's kind of dampening the effect of the price rise when you're looking at it from that business case perspective. I think the big part of that question really is that consumer confidence in the work that's being done. And I think that's where it's important to make sure that when you're bringing somebody in to do the work, whether it be the installation of solar panels or the installation of insulation, even if it's something relatively straightforward like loft insulation, which again, if not done properly, can cause issues of damp in lofts. that it's a contractor that is, depending on the type, Trustmark, that has the PAS 2035 as a preference, that has the MCS accreditation. So depending on the technology, that is linked to that accredited body at the very least. And then, of course, like anything that you do, is making sure that you get a number of quotes, and trying to make sure then you've got references, preferably from people where possible, who can vouch for the work that's been done. But there are also organisations out there that have advice on some of the technology. So there's the Energy Saving Trust website, for example, from a domestic consumer point of view, that can be quite useful as a starting point. But yeah, it is a challenge, but I do expect to see continued growth in the sector. We've had changes in policy which haven't helped with the sector having that confidence to grow at times. But I think we are now at a point where, because it makes sense for people to do it, and they can see the value of reducing their energy or generating their own energy, the market is going to start driving this naturally without as much need for government intervention in certain cases, which means that we will start seeing that growth in the market. Hard to predict how fast it will grow, but I do expect to see growth.
Thanks, thank you. I have a question here from Herbert Eppel. He says, why aren't more city councils involved in addition to Nottingham? And he's given a list of partners at the bottom of a web page. So yeah, I think I understand what that means. Why aren't more city councils involved in the Net Zero Hub besides Nottingham?
Okay, so that's what I can answer quite comfortably. I think that link, I'm not going to click on it in case it messes up the link here, but I think that's the link through to my team. So we're there to work across the Midlands, and in some cases across the country. We have a relationship now in some way, shape or form with pretty much every local authority in the Midlands, and we're working with them to deliver something. Retrofit is the most common, but actually we've got a whole host of different projects. So for example, the PSDS work, we've got 40 public sector organisations across the Midlands we're working with to develop business cases to decarbonise the public estate. With the retrofit side, we're with some local authorities it's direct, with some it's consortia. But again, we're providing that support to help them move towards net zero. With some local authorities, it's a matter of, we've got specific projects and we've been able to identify, actually, this is a good local authority to work with and develop. So, for example, we did a really interesting project around Social Housing Technical Assistance Fund, where we looked at what a local authority or social housing provider would need to do if they've not done much in the net zero space, and kind of how they could position themselves into a space where they could bid for funding. So we worked with West Midlands Combined Authority, we worked with Social Housing Action Partnership, SHAP, Nottingham City Council and South Derbyshire County Council. And out of that work, we developed two different outlooks, one from the East Midlands, one from the West Midlands, and then we tied the two reports together. But interestingly, South Derbyshire, who were involved with that programme, then went on and successfully bid into SHDF Wave 1 funding without any further support from us. But that work they did initially put them into a really good position. And there's different instances of the hub supporting other local authorities in different ways to achieve net zero. So I can say with confidence, yeah, pretty much every local authority in the Midlands is linked into the Midlands Net Zero Hub in some way, shape or form. And through our wider work, we have local authorities across England and Wales who we're also supporting. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I just had a little message actually from Herbert who asked the question. Just says that Nottingham City Council seems to be the only one that's listed on that particular web page. But I think you've explained that there's lots of connections with other ones. Anyway. That's
right. That's because Nottingham acts as the accountable body for the hub, so the team fully sit within Nottingham. So that's why Nottingham is specifically referenced there, because we're fully employed by them and they're kind of running. They're responsible for the programme, and then we're there. But it is a regional programme, so that's why we've got that link there.
Thanks. A related question from Duncan Child. Are there any other hubs in the UK, like the Midlands Hub, And if so, are they carrying out similar work?
Yes, so the hub program is England-wide. We've been broken down into 5 regions: Northeast, Northwest, Midlands, Southeast, Southwest. We all have slightly different models. Most of the others are set, in fact, the other 4 are set within combined authorities. We're the only one to be sat within a city council. And how the teams are set up are all slightly different. I've found the Midlands model, I mean, I will be slightly biased, I admit, but I think it's worked particularly well, because we started off by making sure everybody was employed by one employer, which I think helps. But we placed the team members out in the region. So I've got somebody who actually lives and works in Worcestershire. I've got somebody who lives and works in Marshall, somebody who lives and works in Lincolnshire. So we've kind of got that face in the region to understand the local landscape, the local geography, the local politics, the people, build those relationships. And that's kind of worked really well as a base. And then that's acted as a catalyst for us to build these other programs on, which is why we've seen such, positive growth from that kind of 1.4 million team of 9 to creeping very close now to 200 million secured for the region through BASE funding. And once we fill those vacancies, it'll be a team of about 32 or so. So, we've seen really positive growth as a result. The other hubs, again, they've had their different models they've taken on. We've all got the same core brief, but they've maybe perhaps worked in slightly different directions. But we do work again on that national scale as a collective, looking to see how we can add value and share good practice and resource across our borders. So it's all about looking at what we can do at that local level, that regional level, and then that national level. And it's all about that collaboration, knowledge sharing, reducing silos of work and so on. And it's probably also worth mentioning, it's a different programme, but CAT, a Centre for Alternate Technologies in Machynlleth in Wales, they've also got a hub that's kind of based on similar principles of what we do, and they have a coverage. I think they cover Wales, England and Scotland with what they do. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this space, and there needs to be, because the scale of the challenge is so big. But yeah, the hubs do work together as a collective, and that's what we do link in at time to time with CAT as well in Machynlleth. So it is all about that partnership working to drive the net zero agenda forward.
Thanks. Another question from me here. Are there any projects in the Midlands looking at the use of hydrogen power for locomotives? You mentioned heavy goods vehicles, but anybody looking at it for locos?
Yes, I understand there is something being looked at through the rail network. It's not something the hub are really involved with, but I think it may be something Midlands Connect may be working on. I would need to check that for certain, but depending on who asked the question, I'm happy for them to drop me an email afterwards, and I can just do ping 1 or 2 things off and just check exactly who is leading on that piece of work. But I understand it's certainly something that's been considered and looked at.
Thanks. A question from Duncan, again, when are you trying to get to net zero, and how much have you managed to reduce carbon since the hub was formed? I think Duncan is a target date. And
so from a government perspective, there's the 2050 target, but at a local level, there's a number of more ambitious targets. So from a Nottingham perspective, they're aiming for 2028. We do have a neighbouring local authority who afterwards, I think they may have had a cheeky smile on the face when they did that, are going for 2027. But a lot of local authorities across the Midlands seem to be aiming between 2030 and 2035, with some going for 2040. So there's a real range of targets that we're seeing coming through. So it's really nice to see, we've got this overarching 2050, but there's that real ambition to go and try and reach it faster and quicker. I mean, Nottingham have gone for 2028 because that's when they'll have met their carbon budget. So, it demonstrates that actually, if we're serious about net zero and the reasons why we need to achieve it, it's got to be done at pace. So it is great to see that ambition across the region. And then regarding where we are with the hub, that's something we're currently working on to understand. So we're currently conducting an evaluation of our activity to fully understand the benefits of our work over the last couple of years, and part of that is the carbon. So it's not an answer I can provide now, but it's one we will hopefully be able to provide soon. But of course, the other thing on that is that a lot of our work is in that early project stage, in terms of that project development, and then it gets passed on to the project owners to then move forward. So an awful lot of our stuff is that credit early on. So we don't always at this stage get to fully recognise those carbon benefits, but hopefully in the very near future we've got quite a few that are coming through, and we'll start to see that. But that's again part being built into the evaluation of the hub. So yeah, we'll be able to answer that with more clarity hopefully in the very near future.
Thank you. A question from John Barton: have you started zoning streets according to the future heating technologies that are available? So do you know, for example, which buildings would be on a heat network and which might be better on a hydrogen gas network? He says, I guess not many. Which ones have to install their own standalone heat pumps? He again thinks probably quite a few in that category. If you have done this, this would provide certainty to building owners and installers.
That's a great question. So there's a lot of work being done at the moment in different areas on local area energy planning, which picks up on that particular point. So there are various pieces of local area energy planning that has been done across the Midlands, where the hub has in some cases had a degree of input. What I think I can probably mention is that with D2N2, which is as well as being responsible for the hub, D2N2 is kind of my patch. That's Derby, Nottingham, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire. And it's certainly something we're looking at and moving forward. So we're currently just finalising the socio-economic report for local area energy planning. And then hopefully the next step will be looking to secure funding and developing procurement to go out and develop a local area energy plan for the region. It's linked very closely with our net zero ambitions through the devolution deal that's recently gone through. And we're keen to actually get a really clear picture of the best technology or suite of technologies that can be implemented in certain areas, and it will certainly assist, how we then go on to develop and deliver retrofit funding, for example, in certain areas, and also encourage, the privately owned properties to help select the technologies that they would look to fit in their homes. And of course, it will also help organisations like WPD, the DNO, and Ofgem with some of their decision making on where best to invest and strengthen their networks and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a really exciting piece of work that we really hope will help with that long-term picture and identify what works best where. I mean, I'm a big advocate of the fact that innovation is key. It's really important, and it will continue to help us reach our net zero goal. But we do actually have all the technologies available to us now that we need to achieve net zero. The biggest challenge, of course, is financing that and the skills aspect of it.
Thanks. Well, that's a great answer that leads me on to this last question for now, unless anybody types anything else in while we're talking. And this is another one of mine. I come back from a holiday recently in Scotland. I noticed lots of Scottish houses, new build, with solar PV and sometimes heat pumps as well. So many that it made me wonder whether the Scottish have a different set of kind of local authority planning regulations that really encourage builders, because in many cases the builders are the same builders that you see building estates in England, where you don't see any of that. So is there anything that the Net Zero Hub can do to strongly encourage builders in England to include microgeneration on new buildings?
So Scotland is a devolved power, so and certainly that they've done an awful lot in this space on the path to net zero. There's only so much influence the hub can really have on the planning side of things. It's a planning issue. As you referenced at the start, Rick, the organisation I was at before installed solar in the new build sector. And, I could see the challenges as we were working to, the code for sustainable homes, and then that changed. And then I was seeing instances of, big roofs only at times having a couple of solar panels on, where they could have had considerably more, sometimes going on the north side when they could have gone on the south side, but they didn't want them on the street elevation. There is some real challenges on the planning aspect, and I think there's a huge scope for that to be improved, and it needs to be done in a combination of both from a national perspective and also a local perspective. But there's also then, the opportunity, particularly from a combined authority and devolved power perspective, to help drive that at a more local level in due course. And there are local authorities who are putting out SPDs to help encourage that. That there's always the worry, I think, at the local authority level, that the builders will hop over the border if they make it too challenging. But hopefully we're starting to see a shift in that to try and encourage the build of low carbon homes, so that we're not essentially building homes that we just have to retrofit 10 years from now. But it is a challenge, and we'll continue to champion the cause as time goes on, where we're able to.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Michael. That's the end of the questions. And oh, hang on. No, somebody's just typed another one in. Do you want to take a glass of water? Okay, this last one. This is, do you have any sequestration projects running in hand with what you've talked about tonight?
So at the moment, as I recall the project list, we've not got any that we're actively involved in, but we do get involved in conversations around it. And with some of my work with the local authority groups I support and facilitate, we've certainly brought people like the Forestry Commission in to talk about it. And I think the big aspect on this side of things is that in some respects it should be the last action that we need to consider, in that we want to reduce first and generate generate renewable energy, but equally it needs to be one of the first things we do, because it takes so long, particularly if you're thinking about things like tree planting, for example, because it takes 10 years before it really has an impact. So you need to act now. So we do bring people in. And then the other aspect on this is the fact of reference tree planting. Realistically, there's a lot more to it. There's the biodiversity aspect, and it's not just about planting the same sort of tree all over the place. You need that real mix. And there's also things like restoration of peat bogs, etc., etc. So, we've not really done a huge amount as a hub in that space, but it's certainly something we're getting a bit more involvement in the conversations, and there is a reasonable amount of funding out there that enables it. So, with our net zero brief, once we understand it a bit better, we're waiting on a bit more detail from government on what they'd like us to do moving forward, then it could well be a space we start working in a bit more.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much for answering all of those questions so ably, Michael. That was a really interesting talk. I think, I don't know whether this app allows us to clap. I don't think it does, but anyway, imagine everybody clapping.
Thank you.
Just so that everybody knows, the presentation and the Q&A have been recorded, and they'll be available on the East Midlands Energy Institute website shortly, probably sometime later on this week. And yeah, thanks again, Michael, for being a really informative and useful speaker.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Goodbye, everybody.